What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Tyler and Brittany holding it down for you yet again here on this Tuesday morning as we're recording this, and we're coming at you every weekday here on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. And Brittany, we got a lot to talk about. There's a whole lot going down at the end of this season. You got playoff seedings, you got awards, and that is what we are going to hit on today. First off, how you doing? Are we ready to talk some ball?
Yeah, I'm definitely ready. It's getting down to that point of the season where everyone's getting excited for the playoffs, and certainly we've had a really good regular season, and I know we're going to be in a real treat for the playoffs as well. So definitely looking forward to the end of the regular season wrapping up and all the seedings, kind of getting solidified and going into the playoffs on Sunday.
I am right there with you, and I want to start off with some of the awards talk here because I think in today's biggest news, obviously you still have playoff seedings that can kind of shift one way or the other, and while teams are starting to clinch like the Indiana Fever and Golden State, the spot is not solidified completely yet, so that is all still currently up in the air. And of course, that 8 seed is still not officially clinched for Seattle. So but I do want to talk about MVP because I think amidst all these games with the playoff standings, you had Nafisa Collier out tonight and out listed just for rest, so it's not anything incredibly problematic or anything of that nature. But in terms of the MVP race, that's pretty major. To do this late in the game when you're trying to make your final push and the biggest knock on Fee over the course of this season has been the missed games. Obviously, had the injury, about a third of the way through the season, or probably over halfway through the season,
Mhm.
and missed a whole chunk of games. And obviously, we're not in a league that has like a ton of games. Where the NBA has 82. So if you miss 10 to 15 games, that's over 25% of this season. And just what you're working with the WNBA. So to miss another game here, especially one on national television, where you could really kind of make a statement, feels massive in terms of Nafisa Collier's case to be the MVP. And obviously, we know what Asia Wilson is doing. I'm sure we'll touch on that. Just from your perspective, where are you standing with this MVP case and for Fee? And obviously, the missed games have been a major part here. And to see her, potentially prioritizing the long term and trying to make a deep run in the playoffs over this MVP case.
I think it probably just says a lot about what her mindset is right
Mhm.
now. And that's they have had one mission this season, and that's to win the championship. And I think certainly Nafisa knows what's ahead of her, especially an extended playoff series. Potentially, if you get to that final, in the finals where, you're now into a 3-game, 5-game, 7-game. Those are a lot of extra games on legs, and she plays a lot of minutes. And so I'm not surprised at all, really, that she's choosing this because she wants to win a championship. And
Mhm.
individual accolades are great. And I think anyone who plays the sport will tell you that, in a team sport, certainly you want to be recognized, but you generally are recognized because your team is having success. And Minnesota has put themselves in a position to have the luxury to say, hey, we can give our best player rest leading into the playoffs. And on the flip side of that, Asia Wilson has been on a tear over the 14-game win streak for the Aces, but they haven't had the ability to say, "Hey, you can sit out a game
Mhm.
because we can do that and it wouldn't cost them in the standings." So I think this decision by Nafisa may be a little bit of, hey, maybe I'm not going to win it, but what I had wanted to do entering this season was win a championship. And I think for her that will be more rewarding in the end. So kind of what is your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just, to your point, shows mentality. Like to me, based on everything that has been the kind of push. I mean, I say this and it's really mostly social media chatter, but like the idea, the agenda, quote unquote, if you will, against Fee for MVP has been the missed games. I mean, you add in how great Asia Wilson has been,
Hmm.
and so and you're kind of comparing these cases. That has been the blemish, if you will, on Nafisa Collier's case is the fact that she missed all the games that she did, and so to have this down the stretch, to me, again, you're on national TV. You know this is what the chatter has been. To go and miss this game, to me, I don't know if concession is the right word, but it certainly is to me. a huge point against the fee case, just in terms of the cases are being made in like we are in the final hour of these MVP cases being made, and so to go and do this, not that it's a wrong decision or anything like that. It's totally fine, like because if that is what the priority is, totally great and understandably. But I do think that this is going to hold a pretty decent amount of weight in terms of the whether it be recency bias of voters, like what has happened, what have you done for me recently in that way,
Mhm,
or whatever it may be. And again, of course, all this has to do with the fact that how good Asia Wilson has been in the recent run. And I mean, you say recent run, but it's 14 games of winning and dominance from Asia Wilson now. So it's increasingly becoming less recent because of how long it's been going on, which is impressive in a completely different way. So to me, it does become again. I don't know if concession is the right word, but it certainly feels like we're going here for the long term, and that's completely understandable. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I just do think that's where this makes you lie. If you are the Fisa Collier, if you are the Lynx, like there's a certain priority has been put on the MVP, and it's not very high. And
mhm.
again, nothing wrong with that. Um, just in general, to kind of talk, like where are you standing with the MVP? Because again, obviously we said it here. Nafisa, yes, the game's been missed, but goodness gracious, she has been phenomenal when she has been on the court. And Minnesota are far and away in the standings the best team. And but then on the flip side, you have Asia Wilson who goes on this just absolute tear, like of just dominance, and showed it against Minnesota recently. And again has put this together, and the storyline for the Aces over the course of the season, from where they started to where they are now, and how much of an important role Asia Wilson has played in that has been massive. Then of course you also have players like Alyssa Thomas as well for Phoenix that certainly feel like they have a case, and understandably so for trying to make that case. Just kind of more generally speaking here, like where are you standing with the MVP?
Yeah, I think those 3 players have always been at the top of the list for
Mhm,
me throughout this season for various reasons. I touched on this before. Nafisa was on a 50-40-90. I think she's at 52.6 from the field, 39.2 from the three, and 90.6 from the free throw line.
mhm.
Now, if you aren't a basketball numbers person, that's incredible. There's
Yeah.
only been one other season in the history of the league that has been done. And so to me, that is certainly MVP worthy, regardless of how many games she missed due to injury. And
Mhm,
like you said, with them being the best team, I think that was just normal. She was in the conversation. But then you had Asia Wilson go on this tear over the last 14 games that the Aces have played. And obviously, even before that, she's really good, but
mhm,
it has just been increased and amplified because of the amount of games they have also won. And so I think if you had to vote today, you're probably putting her at the top of the list just because she has been so good over the 14 game winning streak. But I think it's going to be close, and I'm not ignoring Alyssa Thomas. I mean, to average almost a triple double again at the professional level, incredible numbers.
mhm,
But I just don't think there's enough glitz and glam for voters to
mhm,
really put her over the edge. And then I think the biggest knock, in this is hard, but you even saw it the other day against the Sun, is the free throw shooting of Alyssa Thomas. That
mhm,
is a concern
mhm,
if you are in a tight game like they were the other night. I mean, she's a 69, I think, percent free throw shooter. And so if you're looking, even if you're just comparing those numbers across the board with the top 3, when they all get to the line, a fairly significant amount,
mhm.
that would be even a separator if you're looking there. So,
Yeah.
Asia and Fee have been neck and neck. I don't, if I had a vote, I don't know if I would just blindly throw one in and hope that, because I'd pick out of a hat of the two, because I just think they both are so, so valuable to their
Mhm,
teams. They bring in, incredible talent. They play so hard on both ends of the floor. And that's honestly what I love about all 3 of these candidates
mhm,
is both ends of the floor, they are major factors. And sometimes you don't see that in MVP races. You just see points or assists, or, you don't necessarily see the presence on the defensive end of the floor. And so that's what I really love about what I would say is the top three, going into the race.
Yeah, no, for me, I'm with you. We might just have to pick it blindly because there's no. To me, I agree with you. I think Alyssa Thomas is to me firmly in that third place position. But and again, that's no disrespect to AT because it's just how good Fee and Asia have been. And to me, MVP cases always come down to stats, standings, and story. And the stats have been there for all three of these candidates, right? The standings more so for obviously Minnesota is at the top of the standings, but the way that the Aces have charged back, it's not to a point where you can't give it to Asia because that just that gap has closed and just how much of an improvement the Aces have had, and but that's
Hmm.
also the story for Asia is that she has led the way with this improvement for Las Vegas, and it's a tough position because and I don't think you could go wrong with voting Fee or Asia here because it's an interesting thing because Fee hasn't done anything to lose the award, and it's like we were saying pretty early on because it looked clear as day when the Aces were still not this version of the Aces. Like, yeah, Asia Wilson is still Asia Wilson, but in terms of MVP and what you are valuable towards, the Minnesota Lynx keep winning games and the Feast of Collier keeps leading the way. So you're not doing anything to inherently that hasn't changed. Like that's still happening. It just with the missed games, the momentum of that slowed down, and the Aces picked up right at the perfect time, and that's where the in terms of like storyline momentum, I'm interested in seeing how much that weighs on this race because I mean the storyline of the Aces is one of the most intriguing of the entire season, and again, so you have your eyes on that, you see them getting up the standings, and as
Hmm.
soon as you ask why, the answer is Asia Wilson. Amongst other things, but primarily speaking, the answer is Asia Wilson has just been absolutely nuclear. So I think I would lean towards Asia, but goodness, I have no issue with either one of them getting the vote because I mean, again, Minnesota has been at the top of the stand. It's almost like a suffering from success moment because Minnesota has almost phased out of the conversation a little bit because they've been so good.
Yep.
There hasn't been they're not at risk of losing that number one seed. We've had so much to talk about in terms of like 2 through 5 and then 6 through 9 in terms of the playoff standings and everything. So they just haven't been in the conversation nearly as much. So we haven't been able to discuss what that looks like when Fee is still doing Nafisa Collier things. But Asia Wilson is right in the middle of all of that in terms of the playoff seedings and how the Aces have worked their way up. So I'm going to if I was to guess right now who would win, I would say Asia based on that level of like this last quarter of the season or so,
Hmm.
just the absolute dominance and the recency of that. Because really the knock on Asia Wilson's case to me early on was the standings.
Yep.
Those have been fixed. The knock on Afisa Collier's case is the missed games. You can't go back and fix that, and I think that is something that will weigh pretty heavily here for the MVP case. But I'm incredibly intrigued by this race though, because I mean, again, you can't to me go wrong with either of those two. Another race though that I know we wanted to touch on is Coach of the Year,
Hmm.
because I think to a point this had kind of felt like also a foregone conclusion a little bit with Natalie Nakase and the Golden State Valkyries. But you start looking around the league, and there's a couple of great cases to be made here. And even if Natalie is the one to go and win it, I think the standout case outside of her is Carlos Comesco and the Atlanta Dream. Obviously, first year head coach, sitting in second place right now in the WNBA standings. A whole new roster, a whole new system in Atlanta. Um, just where are you at with Coach of the Year? Because again, I think I still would vote Natalie, but the more I think about it, the more I'm like, if you gave a vote to Carl, I got no issue with it really at all. I mean, these are two coaches that have both made history in their own right over the course of this season.
Yeah, Jamie and I touched on this probably, oh geez, I mean over a month ago now,
Mhm.
and the same three have always again kind of been there for me, and that would be Natalie Nakase, Carl Semesco, and then Cheryl Reeve.
Yeah.
And you said it when you talked about the MVP case as well. she just isn't mentioned because sometimes success is just taken for granted and
Mhm.
is expected. And so they're 33-9, sitting atop of the league standings, and that really hasn't been in question for most of this season.
Mhm.
They had separated themselves, and they had done the work where now they have the luxury to, be able to have Nafisa sit a game, Carrington get some rest with some, injuries, and so I think certainly she was in the conversation a little bit more, but that kind of became less when the Valkyries made the postseason for the first time, which had never been done for an expansion franchise. And I think that storyline has just the whole entire Golden State Valkyries organization has really captured the league this year. And so I think that is really hard to ignore because from everything, their attendance, obviously the play on the court, the coaching, the front office has been so valuable to the league that I think it is kind of a foregone conclusion that she probably is the front runner and going to win
Mhm.
it. But Carlos Semesco, in his first season in the league, not even having been an assistant, having no professional experience, steps in and is currently has won 29 games, which is
Yeah.
the most ever for a first time head coach. And I don't think that's probably talked about enough
Mhm.
because of all the other storylines, especially with Golden State. But how impressive that is to make the jump from college to professional and really do it in a way. Certainly, there is a lot of what they played at Florida Gulf Coast that you see in What the Dream Do, but he's tweaked a lot of things that he does as well and adapted. And I think that says so much about a coach because it's not an ego thing. It's, hey, I know I can coach basketball and I know it, but I need to do some things to adjust to this league. And now he's sitting at 29 wins, like you said, in second place, a half game ahead of the Aces. But, I think so. Those two are far and away where I would put them.
Yeah.
If I had a vote, I would probably vote for Natalie Nakase just because the roster,
Mhm.
there's no superstars. We talked about this, just players, the international experience, players that she's elevated. And when you hear everything kind of about what she does and who she is for that team, it's just incredible that they're in the position they're in.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100% on all that. Like I would still vote Natalie. I mean, I think like this didn't feel possible, frankly. It felt like a foregone conclusion that Golden State would not be in the playoffs, that we'd see them in the lottery and they would build from there. And that wasn't a bad thing. That was totally fine and expected. And then they went and made history by making the playoffs and everything that they've been able to do. And completely set the highest possible standard for literally any expansion franchise coming the rest of the way for the WNBA. But from Carlos Mesco's perspective, I completely agree in the sense of I'm so impressed by obviously it was incredibly successful on the college level. But I think the biggest thing to me is you mentioned the system and adapting to that, but I also think you're adapting to a completely different set of personalities in the sense of professional players. You're looking at star players as well. Like, these are legit. I mean, like you got a Hall of Famer in Brittany Griner right there. Like you got Alicia Gray and Ryan Howard like are legitimate star players in this league. And with all due respect to the talent at Florida Gulf Coast, and like, but that's not what you're normally working with there. Like, it's just a completely different vibe. Like you're not a UConn or South Carolina where you have these players that are fully on the
Hmm.
road to go into the WNBA and have been preparing like this and are a top recruit. That's not what you're working with, and it's just it's a completely different style of team management that you're doing from Florida Gulf Coast compared to a professional WNBA team. And by every indication, he's knocked it out of the park. Like the way the players talk about him and everything like that. So even off the court, it seems to be just perfect, frankly, in terms of the fit in Atlanta, both as you mentioned with on the court with the system and because she a very unique system at Florida Gulf Coast. And
Hmm.
had you adapted that 1-to-1 here, I don't think this would have worked. And with the style of the roster and everything like that, I don't think it would have worked. And so to take what you like because there are parts of that that you certainly still see. It's not a completely brand new and certainly the 3 point shooting and everything from the perimeter players is familiar to what we saw there. But knowing how to work in the bigs and things like that has been incredibly impressive. And then again, being able to know how to coach professionals. 'Cause it's just a completely different thing entirely to coach professionals versus coaching college kids, especially at a mid-major level in that way. And so I've just been incredibly impressed. So it becomes one of those things where it's like to me this one's more clear than the MVP race, where it's like I would vote Natalie, and just again just because how unprecedented that has been in terms of an expansion franchise and where the expectations were versus where they landed. But I would have no problem at all with anyone making a case for Smesco out of Atlanta to be coach of the year there. But I did want to touch on as well just a couple of these games. We mentioned Golden State, and they play a game against the Storm tonight. Just as we wrap up here, and just I want to get quick thoughts on these games. Is again that 8 seed technically still up in the air. The LA Sparks a game and a half back of Seattle. Time's winding down. There's not a whole lot of time left here for the Sparks to try and make that push. They play Phoenix tonight, but they're going to need a little bit of help. Golden State certainly clinch their spot, but still looking to maintain their seeding at that
Mhm.
sixth place. I'll start with Golden State and Seattle. We'll just kind of get some quick hit thoughts here, but like, where you at with let's focus on Seattle here more particularly, just because they're the ones still fighting for that spot. Um, it's it's still been such a roller coaster with Seattle, and anytime you think they might stabilize, it doesn't. And I just where it's I expect them to make the playoffs,
Mhm.
but they might be kind of limping their way in, if you will. Where are you standing right now with Seattle?
Yeah, I think they will sneak in, but like you said, just a roller coaster.
Hmm.
It's you don't ever really know what to expect. I mean, they can play well for a certain stretch of a game and then, completely look like they have no idea what's going on. So, but I will say if they do get in as the 8, they are 2-2 against Minnesota this
Yeah.
year. So, I think that would give them, a lot of hope if they do get in as the 8 because they know they can go to Minnesota and win. I mean, they just did it a couple weeks ago or whenever that game was at Minnesota, and so I think I think they do sneak in. It's an important game though for Golden State as well because of seeding
Hmm.
potential. So they're still in that 6, but they could slip. And I think if you're in that 6-7 spot, avoiding the aces as well as they're playing is probably very important.
Yeah.
I mean, Las Vegas hasn't locked up the 2 seed, but it certainly kind of seems like that will happen. And so this is just a massive game. I mean, if the Storm lose that, then now you're into the last game of the season for your playoff hopes. But I just think the Storm probably get it done, but again, you don't know, and the way Golden State plays every game, it should
Hmm.
be really just kind of a knockdown, drag out kind of battle tonight.
Yeah. No, I'm with you 100%. For me, the Storm, and it's at this point, it's my own fault for still being like, well, they could, they could, because I'm with you where I'm like, if they match up with Minnesota, like, do I think they would win? No, but out of all the teams in the bottom tier that Minnesota like has a chance to see in the first round,
Mhm,
uh, Seattle would not be the team I want to see for them and the way that they've played against Minnesota, and certainly you have a team of and part why it's so confusing the inconsistency is that you have a team full of players that have been in the playoffs before, that have done this before, that have gone on deep runs in the playoffs before, that have won championships before, all over this roster. So that's where the inconsistency is so mind-boggling to me. But also, it's like, well, if they get to the playoffs, if they make their way there, they could. They could finally maybe piece it together. And again,
mhm.
that's at this point, I've been fooled too many times to still even make that point. But it's still just there in the back of my mind. But I completely agree though. You don't know what you're getting, and so like as much as we want to, like I'm leaning towards saying like they should be fine and make the playoffs. At this point, who knows when it comes to Seattle? So that's going to be a very interesting game, and then but ultimately Los Angeles has to win against Phoenix tonight to be able to keep their hopes alive with again a game and a half back of the 8 seed. Phoenix probably like should be probably in that 4 seed
Mhm,
pretty comfortably. I certainly don't think New York's going to catch them. Them being able to make their way up into that 3 seed is not impossible right now by any means, but I'm certainly thinking that they'll probably be in that 4 seed. You mentioned it though, not the most like convincing times for Phoenix as well. Again, we similar kind of talks of inconsistency at points with Phoenix, not to the degree of Seattle,
No.
but just with LA, we'll take an LA focus here. You have to win. I mean, this is must win if you want to try and keep your season alive. What do they have to do? What are you looking for in order for LA to try and get it done tonight?
Well, I've said this several times, and
That's
that's
where I figured you were going.
play defense. But I think that's just been their Achilles heel all year, and
Yeah.
it just doesn't show up over the course of 40 minutes consistently enough on a night to night basis. And now, will it with your backs against the wall, knowing it's a must win? Maybe,
Mhm.
but again, like you kind of said, they haven't convinced us enough that it's a doable thing. And I think Phoenix, though, too, is at a point where they need to kind of get a little momentum going into the playoffs.
Mhm.
They have been a little inconsistent, a little bit of a roller coaster up and down. They look really good. They can look really bad. Certainly, that game against the Sun hurt where they were kind of in the standings. I think more locked into the four now, probably. But you want to be playing your best basketball with the playoffs, starting. So I think that's going to be a really tough challenge for the Sparks to be on the road and get, enough stops on the defensive end in a game where, Phoenix wants to win just as much as LA because of the playoffs just around the corner.
I'm with you. Again, it's the inconsistency on defense has certainly been the Achilles heel, and it feels like, I mean, certainly at this point, these teams are who they are for a whole. You can kind of go down the list, and good or
Hmm.
bad, they are
Yeah.
who they are, and we know who the LA Sparks are on either side of the ball, good and bad. And but again, you're looking at a Phoenix team that has slipped up. Is certainly, it's not impossible by any means to win this game. And so I'll be very interested in seeing how both those games go. And again, we might have our playoffs pretty much solidified tonight in a whole lot of ways. And we are right here at the tail end of this season. I'm very excited to see where we go from here. So make sure you guys stay tapped in to the Her Hoop Stats podcast so you are in the know at all times. We'll be back here with you tomorrow. Again, every weekday coming your way with Her Hoop Stats podcast. For myself and for Brittany, we'll talk soon.